and welcome to the Argos Report Writer Training. My name is Bernie and I'll be leading the training today. The intended audience for this training is the Argos Report Writer. The prerequisites for this training is the Argos Report Viewer Training or a basic understanding of the Argos product. The goal of this training is to demonstrate the functionalities available to the report writer and how to create each of the 4 types of reports available in Argos. We will be covering the following objectives in this training. We will be doing an overview of what the report writer role is, the differences between a shared report and a private report, how to create each type of report, how to add filters, sorts, and expressions to a report, how to add objects to the Library of Objects tool. First, we're going to provide an overview of what a report writer does. To create a report, there are 3 things we need: a data block form, a report query, and a report format. As a report writer, we use the information coming from the data block and create report formats for the report viewer to use. So as a report writer, we are dependent on the information coming from the data block to create our reports. For example, here we have created a report from a data block returning the students that have an outstanding balance and have a past due balance on their account. We like this report format and want to return all the students that have an outstanding balance even if they're not past due. For this, we would need a completely separate data block because we're accessing a broader population. Another example would be if we wanted to add a new data element to the report, such as a phone number. Again, we would require an entirely new data block at this time because the data elements have changed. Even though we're still working with the same population, we would still need a modified query for this new data element, in this case, the student's phone number. This ultimately comes down to communication. Discussion will be necessary between the 3 parties that will be involved in the report creation process. This will ensure that the created report contains all the required data elements. When creating a report, we can have the data block designer create a data block that is multifunctional, and it can be difficult because it can be difficult to go back and modify a data block after it has already been created. Next, we will discuss the differences between a shared and private report. Let's get started and launch Argos through our eLauncher webpage. And I'm also going to go ahead and log in as a viewer. For your information, Google Chrome has disabled MP API support in September 2015 and will no longer be possible to use Java to launch Maps and its associated applications. In order to better support our users who prefer the Chrome browser, eVision has added the option to launch without using Java using eVision's application launcher, which was released in Maps version 4.5. For more information on this feature, please refer to the Maps 4.5 release guide or open a help desk ticket if you have any questions. I'll go ahead and launch Argos. Alright, so now you can see my screen. On the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that I am logged in as a report viewer. And if I go ahead and expand our folders and go down to the report writer, and under our address information data block, you can see that we have 4 reports: the dashboard, the extract, the CSV, and banded reports. Now if I log out and log back in as a writer, you can see that we have another report. And it's slightly different from our other reports because it has an eye superimposed over the banded report icon. This indicates that this report is private and can only be seen by the person who made the report private. Only those that can edit a report are able to make reports private. A good use for a private report is to make a report private while you, the report writer, are developing the report. When the report is ready to go into production, change the security settings to share it so that everybody can see it. The next concept I want to go over is only informational. As a report writer, you cannot implement it, but I do want you to be aware of it. Let's say that you have a report that is wanted by different people in different departments, and they all want pretty much the same information. The information is not sensitive in nature, so a report is created for everyone to use. Later, one group needs a piece of information that is sensitive in nature. This could be a social security number, a disability indicator, or an indicator that someone is getting financial aid. This information should only be viewed by the users with the appropriate permissions. The data block designer role has the ability to restrict access to a piece of data based on who runs the report. Let's say that the last name data is private information. The data block designer will grant access to the last name field only to people in human resources. When the report is run by a member of human resources, the report will include the information under the last name. When the report is run by anyone else outside of the human resource department, the report will not contain information under the last name. It will be blank. And this gives you a lot of flexibility to broaden the users of a report. But again, this requires communication between your data block designer to create the required report. Alright, next we will be creating each of the different reports. Back in Argos, to create a report, we will highlight the data block we want to create the report for, and then we'll go ahead and click on New under the Report Writer Actions. This pops up a Create a New Report or Dashboard window. Here we will give the report a name. Alright, someone asked the question, how can we recognize that a field has security turned on? That we will actually be going over in tomorrow's training, the Data Block Designer training, since that is the training where we show how to actually implement the security. Alright, thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, now we have this window to create a new report or dashboard. In here, we can go ahead and give our report our name. Let's give this. And then we can make our report private by clicking on the private radio box, and we can go ahead and give our report a description. Please note that we want to be as descriptive as possible when creating our description so our users know what this report does. And as you can see, we have our types of reports here. The dashboard essentially just creates the same dashboard that we created in our data block. So it's just essentially a shortcut to the dashboard. So we'll actually be using our 3 other types of reports that actually can be created. So the comma delimited, the banded, and the extract. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and give our description. And then we're going to go ahead and choose comma delimited and click on create. And this will automatically take us to the edit report window. And you can see that we have 6 tabs. We have the general, filter, sort, refresh, API, and save execution states. We'll talk about the filter and sort tab throughout our training. The refresh tab allows you to refresh variables within the data block. The API tab is for administrators to set up API calls. And the Save Executions tab is used for managing save states. If we want to find more information about the different options of these tabs, we can click on our F1 key to launch our in-product help for this topic. At any time you are working in Argos, you can press the F1 key to launch our in-product help article, which will open to the article based on the location you are in Argos. Alright, so we'll go back to our General tab, and now we'll go ahead and click on the Design button. And here's our design window for the CSV report. Notice that we have the title of the report on top of our design window. And remember, we are creating a CSV report, which is a flat text file, so the design work can be minimal. First, we will select the field for our reports, which are listed on the left-hand side pane. And there are the database fields that are returned from the data block query. If we need a field that isn't in this list, we will need to work with our data block designer to get it added. We can select our fields for our reports in 2 ways. One way is by double-clicking on a field to add it. We can also use the control keys to select multiple and use our arrow to move them to the right-hand side. We could also use these double arrows to move all our fields to the right-hand side. And to remove fields from the right-hand side, we'll use this X button. Alright, so now for our report, we'll go ahead and add the field last name, first name, street 1, city, state, and zip. To reorder our columns, we can use these blue up and down arrows. We can also rename our headers by selecting our field and clicking on this AB with the little pencil icon. And notice that we can also have spaces in our column headers. And this is because it's just a column header. We're not actually renaming this field. Alright, so far we have added all our fields to our CSV report, but we can also add expressions. By clicking on the E equals MC squared button, this will bring up the expression builder, which will help us build our expression. The FN icon is a list of available functions. The ABC icon is a list of user-defined variables. And the signal icon is a list of dataset fields. For simple demonstration, we'll be adding an expression returning the report date. I'll click on the function to report our date, and I can either click on the all categories to see all our available functions, or select a subcategory. We're going to go ahead and use the date, so I will select the date and time category, and I'll choose the now function, which brings back the current system date. And as you can see right here, if we select a field, we will have a brief description of what this function does. Alright, so we'll click on now. And this brings us back to our expression builder. That's all we need for our date, so we'll click OK. We will give our field a name. And we'll click OK. And now we're back in our Edit CSV report window. And now we'll go ahead and save a report and execute a report to see how it looks like. Oh, sorry about that. Seems to... There it is. Sorry, it just hid behind this window. I apologize for that. So we're going to go ahead and choose our required parameters and launch our report. Alright, and here we have our CSV report. Let me expand our fields, and you can see we have our field selected, and our column headers have been adjusted to the way we adjusted them in our CSV report, and we have our date and time field. Alright, so now that we have a report, notice here that we have a variety of different states being returned, as well as our report is ordered by the last name and then first name. So let's go ahead and close out of our report, and we'll go ahead and add some sorts and filters to our report so we can bring back a different type of sort and only the states that we want to return. So we won't save this. So now we'll go ahead and edit our report. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to filter, sorts, and expressions. So in our Edit Report window, we'll click on our Filters tab. Filters and sorts are part of editing a report. Once activated, they can only be deactivated by a report writer role or above. To activate a filter sort, you'll need to check the Activate box. Something that should be noted is that filters set up in the Report Filter tab run after all the filters and conditions coming from the data blocks report query. So if used, the Filter tab is essentially tacking on additional conditions to the existing data block. In the case where we have a large record set, this will add additional processing time. However, sorts that are set up in the Report Sort tab will completely bypass any sort order defined in the data block and use the report sort order instead. First, we're going to go ahead and add filters, and we will check on Activate Additional Filtering. And we'll go ahead and use the example of Pennsylvania that we saw in our report viewer training. So we'll go ahead and add the state. We can either double click to add it, or we can use our blue arrow. So in here we will set this equal to single quote PA. Since we only want Pennsylvania to be returned. So now if I wanted to add an additional state, we can do this by doing and adding our spreader state again and adding our state. However, if we have multiple states that we want to add, we don't want to do this for each state we want to add. We can use a function to do this. If you're familiar with SQL, many SQL functions will work here. And we're going to go ahead and use our in function to include all our user input. So we'll do in, open parentheses, PA, CA, and close our parentheses. Now we're going to go ahead and work with our sort tab. We will override the main report query sort by checking this box. And we're going to go ahead and sort by state and then city. And we will click OK to save our changes. And now we'll run a report. And as you can see here, now the only records that are being returned are from our state, PA. I unfortunately didn't return enough records to get anything from California, but as you can see, it is being sorted by state and then city. And the records that aren't showing up are just not part of our record set. They are still part of the actual data set that's being returned by the report query. We're just not using it when running this report because we're adding those additional filters. If we would have added those additional filters when we first created our report, the first time we would have ran our report, we would have seen it with those additional filters. I just unfortunately didn't choose enough records when selecting our query here. That's why we didn't get anything from California. If we rerun this, we should possibly get our California records. Yep, and now we have some California, and you can see it's sorted first by state, and then by Pennsylvania, and then by city. Let me expand this so it's clearer here. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our extract report. An extract report is a Flax text file report, and it's similar to a CSV report, which is designed to meet our predefined output specifications. It can also create a comma-delimited output that is more complex than a CSV file. And it also can create a fixed width and XML files. We're going to go ahead and create an extract report that will output the fixed width format, and we'll go ahead and start by creating a new report underneath our data block. We'll go ahead and give it a name. Our description. And we'll go ahead and select Extract Report from our report type and go ahead and click Create. And this brings us again to our Edit Report window where we can add our filters and sorts. We won't be adding any filters and sort for our extract report, so we'll go ahead and go straight into the design by clicking on the Design button. And this is the Extract Report design window. Notice that we have the name of the report on the top of our design window. And we have 3 sections. For our design, we have a report structure, our configured report, and data sets. I want to talk about the dataset region first. The dataset region contains the SQL queries that can return data for a report. The Argos data main dataset contains the data selected by the report query in the Argos data block. Notice that these are the same fields that we had available in our CSV report. The other datasets contain results from our other queries in the dashboard. We can use these as part of our report as well. The middle area is where we will configure each section, and we will start by configuring the report settings. Some programs such as Microsoft Excel require this by order mark in order to render some UTF-8 characters. So if you need this check, you can go ahead and add it by clicking on the Include by Order Mark checkbox. And now we will be creating a fixed width report, but I want to go ahead and show you that you can choose a different type, a delimited or extract, by clicking on the report format. If we click on delimited, notice now that we get a warning. It notifies users that undue information is not stored for this action, and you will lose all configuration data specific to the current format. So for right now, since we haven't added anything, we'll go ahead and click yes, that we do want to change it. And for the delimited extract report, notice that we have a field called delimiter. The delimiter is used to separate data, most commonly by using the comma as a delimiter. But for some cases, a tab can be used as a delimiter. The icon here that has 2 arrows pointing opposite from each other will insert a tab into our delimiter. You can see right here that that is our tab that has been added. Alright, so for our example, as I mentioned, we will be creating a fixed width report. So we'll go ahead and change our report format to fixed width. We'll go ahead and click on yes. Alright. And for our example, we're going to go ahead and keep the defaults that we have set here in our Configure Report Settings section. And to the left is our report structure area. Here we can add sections to the report. If we click on the little drop-down arrow, we can set the different types of sections we can add. The detail record is the most important section within a report because it contains the record information being returned from the data source. One detail section contains information for one record, and it will repeat for each record returned from the report. The report structure area is also where we will add our section for common objects, just as we saw in our report viewer training. If you would like more information on the report format, check our in-product help documentation. First, we will be adding our title section to our fixed width report. In the middle configuration area, we can see that we can configure the section properties. And note that we have this option to print conditionally by creating an expression. And in our Fields tab is where we will be adding our fields that we want to include in our title section. By clicking on the drop-down next to this plus sign, we can see the different types of fields we can add. A dataset field, an expression, an easy expression will allow you to use more commonly used expressions, constants, and a variable. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add a couple constants to our title section. And the first constant is going to be our school name, so we're going to name this constant to school. And next we will set the width to 45, and we will go ahead and type in our value. So we'll go ahead and type in the value of eVisions University, and notice now then when I'm typing, it's changing the width. And this is because it's a constant variable, so we'll first need to type out our value and then adjust our width. So now we'll go ahead and change this back to 45. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add another constant. And this is going to be our contact email. And we're going to go ahead and add our value and then adjust our width. And adjust our width to 45. Oops. Alright, so now we want to add an expression to generate today's date. To do this, we will add an expression field. We will rename our expression to report run date. And we will change the width to 10. We can change the width here first because it's an expression and not a constant. Now we're going to go ahead and create our expression to retrieve today's date by clicking on the ellipses next to our expression builder. And this will bring up our expression builder, just like in our CSV reports. So I'll go ahead and go into our function button. We'll go to date and time, and we will select our now function and click OK. And OK to get back to our configure section. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and apply a formatting mask so we can display our date in the way we want. So we go ahead and scroll down here. We can see that we have a formatting mask section, and we'll go ahead and click on the ellipses to see the different types of formats we can add. So notice now that this format, the month, day, and year, has 10 characters, so we will go ahead and use this one. So we will double click, make sure you see it right here before clicking OK. And now we have our formatting mask added. And it's going to generate a date that is 10 characters wide, which is the width of our field. Alright, so next we're going to go ahead and create a comments row that we saw in our report viewer training. We're going to add a child section. We'll click on our drop down next to our arrow. Oh, sorry, because I did expand the screen, it showed up on my other monitor, so we can see here. And we're going to go ahead and add our child section. Alright, and now we're going to go ahead and go into the section properties, and we're going to go ahead and change the name of this to comment. And then notice here that our parent section is the title section, and we want this to be the title section because we want our comment section to be right after our title section. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and go into our Fields tab, and we're going to go ahead and add our comment variable by clicking on the Add Variable, and then we're going to go ahead and choose our comment variable. And we will set the width to 100. So now any comments that are typed into the comments box will be included in our report. Next, we're going to go ahead and move on to our detail section. To add a detail section, we can click on the plus button, and this will add our detail section. And we can rename the section in our section properties tab, and we also can change the associated data set. But for now, we're just going to accept the default and go to our Fields tab. So here we're going to go ahead and add our fields. We can add our fields by clicking on the drop down and going down to variable and then choosing our fields. Oh, excuse me, we don't want a variable, we want a dataset field, sorry. To add dataset, and then we can choose our dataset, our Argos data, and then we can go ahead and select the field we want to add. We can also use our datasets section to add our fields as well, so we can select one and drag to our field section, or we can double click to add as well. Alright, so now for our report, we're going to go ahead and include the ID, the last name, first name, city, state, and zip. Now we will click on each field and configure the width based on our report specification requirements. Remember that the width of the field defines the number of characters that will be displayed. So if someone's name is longer than 25 characters, the name will be truncated. So we're going to go ahead and change the ID to 15, the last name to 25, first name to 15, city to 35, state to 4, and zip to 10. Now report is complete. Let's go ahead and see how it looks like. Up here, notice that we have our test button, which is this play button right here, that allows us to preview our report without leaving the design window. So we'll click on our preview button, and our parameter entry window pops up. We can't test the query without populating the variables, so we will need to fill the required variables for the date, entity type, and address type. And we'll also go ahead and include something in our comment section. We'll select our fields here. Alright, so notice now that we have this maximum record count on the bottom left-hand side of our screen. Setting this to 0 will return all the records in our data set. While running a test of a report, we don't need to return all records, we just need to return enough records so we can see the design of a report. So we'll go ahead and change this to 100 and click OK. And here is our report. And you can see that we have our title section with eVisions University, our email, and today's date. And then we have our comments that we entered in our comment parameter. And then we have our detail section here, and each column has fixed width. Alright, so we'll save our changes, and we will close out of our report. So now before we get started on creating our banded report, I'd like to go over some basic concepts. It's called a banded report because the data for a banded report is arranged in bands. It is similar to our extract report, except extract report data is arranged in sections. There's a great deal of similarity between the two different types of report styles, but they do work differently. And knowing how bands work is crucial to be able to build a banded report. The first band that we are going to talk about is our detail band. The detail band is the most important band within our report because it contains the record information being returned from the data source. One detail band contains information for one record, and the detail band repeats for each record to the end of the report. While the rest of the bands we're going to discuss are optional, a report must have a detail band. The first optional band is the page header band. The page header prints at the top of each page. We can also have a page footer band that prints at the bottom of each page. The next band is a title band, which prints only on our first page. And just like a title band, we have a summary band that prints only on the last page. We also have a column header band, which prints on the top of every page. The next band is a grouping band. There is a group header that defines the beginning of a band and a group footer that defines the end of the band. Grouping bands are bands that group detailed records based on a definition. In a grouping band, the header band is required and the footer band is optional. The next band is a child band, which always prints after its parent band. We have a child band here following our group header that contains the column labels, and it's difficult to see, but we also have a child band following the group footer. In this case, this band does not contain any data, and it's just being used as a spacer to separate our group footer from the following group header. The end product documentation covers the definitions for all the bands if you want to review this information later. Alright, so we're going to be creating a report that looks similar to this banded report that we have here. So our resulting banded report that we will be creating today will look similar to this one. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and close here, and we will create our banded report by selecting our data block and clicking New underneath our report writer actions. Zoe's, we'll go ahead and give it a name. And select the banded report icon and click on Create. And we can add filters and sorts to our banded report just like we did with our CSV report. We're actually going to be adding a sort to our banded report, so we're going to go ahead and check to override the report query. And then we're going to sort by state first, then by city, and then we'll sort by last name. And, and last name and first name. Since I added first name first, we're going to go ahead and move up our last name using our arrows here. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and go back into our General tab and click on the Design button. When we click on the Design button, we will go into the Banded Report Wizard, which will help us create our report. The Banded Report Wizard has two tabs, Report Type and Report Styles. We have different types of templates, and as we select them, we can see an example on the right. So we select Lists, Tabular, Blank, Form Style, and Mailing Labels. If we have a specific template, it can be selected from the Library of Objects by clicking on our Library of Objects button. And this is a collection of different types of objects you can create and use again in your report. When running the Banded Report Wizard, we can select a template and or style from the Library of Objects. A template is a pre-built report which can contain images or preset fonts that you may want to use in your report. A style is a set of colors and fonts. We're going to go ahead and go back into our report template and return to our standard type selection, and we will click on the list report and click on the next at the bottom right hand corner. And now we're going to go ahead in our report data section. Here we have the available fields from the data block, and notice that they are the same fields that were available in our other reports. We can go ahead and select them by using our arrows or double clicking to add. So we're going to go ahead and add the last name, the first name, the city, state, and zip. Notice now that our preview window has adjusted to fit our items that we've added. If we forget to add a field in our report data banded report wizard, it's alright. We can always add fields when we're editing our report, so don't fret if we forget to add a field here. So we're going to go ahead and click on Next. And this window allows you to choose some default bands. Bands are added or removed once inside the editor as well. So we're going to go ahead and add a page footer band to hold our page number. And in our page setting tab, we could change our report title, the page settings, the size, the margin, the orientation, the number of columns can also be modified here. We'll go ahead and leave these as default, and we'll click on Finish. And here is our basic report. We'll discuss the toolbar throughout our training as we use our objects. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and preview how our report looks like by clicking on this page and little magnifying glass icon. And again, we have to enter our parameters. We'll click OK. And see, we have a very basic report to work off of. Alright, but this is a great starting point, so we're going to go ahead and click Close, and we'll start modifying our banded report. Alright, so before we get started, let's go ahead and go over our banded report interface. The report name appears on the top just like it did with our other reports. And I'd like for you to focus on our structural panel here on our left-hand side. This was implemented in the latest Argos 4.5 build. Before, we would have a drop-down that displays all the bands and objects. With the report structure panel, it is more organized and easier to search for bands and objects in the reports. This shows all of the bands in the report and every object that is placed in the band. As we add content to the banded report, you'll notice that the structure pane will be filled with our bands and objects, and we will use this throughout our banded report creation as well. First, we're going to go ahead and add our date to our page header. For that, we will need a system variable. To add a system variable, we'll click on this sys icon here, and then we'll click on the band we want to add our variable to. And then we're going to go ahead and add our text. Notice that when we add an object to our band, we first click on our object and then click on the band we want to add it. Adding bands is a bit different, and we will see that later on in our training. So we're going to go ahead and give this some text, report printed on. Alright, and make sure when you are adding text to a system variable that you do add a space, since the variable will print directly after any text. So we do need that space there. So we're going to go ahead and click on date. From our type drop-down, we're going to go ahead and leave these defaults here and go ahead and click OK. And now we can go ahead and move our report printed on to the top left-hand corner. And I'm not sure if they're visible through the webinar, but we can see some blue and purple guidelines that let us know if we're at the top of our band or if we're aligning with a different object within our banded report. So we'll align this up here. And that is all we will need to do for our page header band. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and add a page number. We could use the system variable again to get a simple page count, but we want to do something a bit more complex that will also contain the current page number as well. We're going to go ahead and use an expression to achieve this. To add an expression, we will first click on our equals MC squared icon, and then click on our page footer band where we want to add our page number. And this will open our edit expression field window. And to get to our expression editor, we will click on the ellipses. And this is our expression window. This is a bit different from the expression builder that we saw in our CSV and extract report, but it does have the same options. They just don't have the same icons as it did in our other reports. So we want to add something that's like page number of page count. So first we're going to go ahead and add a function. And this will bring a list of all the available functions, and we can look through all the functions by clicking on all. Or if we know our subcategory, we can click that as well. I know that our page number is under that other category, so select that, and we will select our page number. And click continue. And now we have our page number in our expression. We will add some wording with leading and trailing spaces, and we will include a plus sign between each variable to concatenate the variable with our text. So we're going to go ahead and do a plus sign to concatenate, and then we're going to do a single space, single quote, a space, and another single quote, a plus sign to concatenate, and then we're going to go ahead and use another function to bring the page count. Alright, so now our expression reads page number of page count. To confirm that the expression is constructed properly, we're going to go ahead and click on the validate, and you can see our results are page 1 of 0. And this is just a test, so it's not showing the correct counts, and that's fine. We just need to make sure that there are no errors. Alright, so we'll click OK. This looks fine, but I think we also want to add the word page in front of the page number function. So we're going to go ahead and put our cursor in front of page number. We will add our single quote, page, and then make sure to add a space. So we do have a space between our page number and our text, and a single quote, And let's not forget our plus sign to concatenate our variables. We're going to go ahead and validate again. And this looks good. Now we have page 1 of 0, and there are no errors. So we'll click OK. We will click OK. And now we have our expression in our expression field. Now we're going to go ahead and set this to be aligned at the center. And we're going to go ahead and set the auto size width by checking that box, and we'll click OK. Now we're going to go ahead and move our object to the top of our band. And now notice that we have some wasted white space here, and to eliminate that, so we're going to go ahead and click on our band. And now we have these guide little squares where we can select and then drag to minimize our band size. Alright, so now we want to align our field to the center of our band, and we can use our alignment toolbar. So we want to align it by the horizontal and by the vertical of the band. Alright, we have a question. What does auto size width mean? So the auto size width means that this field's width will depend on what is being brought back. So let's say right now we have page 1 of 2. So it's going to automatically size this to only be large enough to hold that text. But if we had a field that was page 10,000 of 1 million, that number is much larger than 1 of 2. So this will auto size the width of this field to automatically fit the extended size of the page. If we would have had this set to not auto size width, and we would have just set the width automatically by changing the size of this field, if the number were larger, it wouldn't automatically resize this field to fit the entire text that we're adding, our entire field. So that's why the auto size width is very useful, especially creating expression or bringing back database text fields. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our title band. So in our title band, we have the default title, which is New Report. We're going to go ahead and double click to change this. We'll change this to Address List. Alright, and we also have the auto size width checked on this. We really don't need it because this is a constant variable, so we could uncheck it if we like. I'll just leave it default of it checked, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and move this guy to the right-hand side by clicking and dragging this guy. Notice now that the T is right at the edge. If we want to move it just a few pixels, we can always use our arrows in our key bar. So we'll just shift it just a little bit there, and we're going to go ahead and align it to the horizontal center. Oh, sorry, I wanted the vertical. We can always use our undo button here, which is this arrow. But I'll just go ahead and click and drag this guy. Sorry, I double clicked there. We want this guy to the vertical of our band. Alright. So now that we've changed our logo, we can also change the font by clicking on our font toolbar here. We're going to go ahead and change the font type to Ardana, and then we're going to go ahead and change the size to 22, and then we're going to go ahead and change the font color to this blue. And since we changed the font size, we have to readjust our title to fit within our band. Alright, now that we've added our title, we want to go ahead and add our logo to our title band. To add a picture file, we can click on this icon here that looks like a little mountain scene. However, this should only be done the first time you add an object to Argos. Argos is not designed to modify images. If modification is performed on an image, it will begin to pixelate. We want to prevent this, especially when creating abandoned reports, since they are designed to be printed. We recommend using a photo manipulation software such as Photoshop to resize your image first, and then add your image to the library of objects. We will be discussing how to add to the library of objects later in our training. For now, we're just going to go ahead and retrieve our logo from our library of objects. Alright, the library of object is this icon here that looks like a book. So we will first click on our band where we want to add our object, and then click on our library of object icon. And this will take us to our default folder. And if we have access to a different folder, we can also grab files from there. So we're going to go ahead and grab our logo, and we will click OK. And now this is automatically added to our band here, and we don't have to do anything. And notice that it's placed on the left-hand side of our title band, and this was because when this object was added to our library of objects, this image here was in the same position. Alright, so we can also use our toolbars to align our address list with our logo by selecting our objects. So if we want to align it to the address, our logo to our address list, we first need to select this object, and then using our control key, we will select our logo. And notice now that both of our objects are selected. You can see this in our structural panel, that both our objects are selected as well. And now we can use our alignment toolbars to align them to their centers. Alright, that looks good. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and work with our labels. First, we want to select our labels, and we can select multiple labels again by using our Shift key. We can also hold down our Control key and draw a lasso all around our fields we want to select them all. And again, we can use our structure panel and our Shift and Control keys to select all our labels. Alright, now that we have all our labels selected, we're going to go ahead and modify these labels so they change in unison by clicking on our Edit button underneath our structure panel. And then we're going to go ahead and set the properties to be the same as the band. And then we're going to go ahead and set our alignment to the left-hand side and our color to transparent. We're going to go ahead and leave the default and click OK. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look at how our report is coming along. So we're going to go ahead and first save our report, clicking on the floppy disk icon, and click on our preview icon, which is this magnifying glass. And notice now that our parameters are still selected, and that's because we haven't left our design window. And we'll click OK here. And here is our report. And you can see that we have page 1 of 1. We have our title, when the report was printed on, and our logo. Alright, so now let's go ahead and add our grouping bands. So we're going to go ahead and group by our records by state. To add our grouping band, we will first click on our band object and then click on our reports. Doesn't matter where you click on the report because the bands are automatically placed where they need to go in our banded report designer. So we're going to go ahead and select right here, notice that we have some different band objects. We have our single band, which is used to create our title band, page header. We also have our child band icon here. That is the white and blue square. And we have our group band, which is the dark blue and then the white square. And then we have our sub-detail band, which is this white band with the little blue square. So we're going to go ahead and add our band group. So as I said, we'll click on our band and it will be automatically placed. You see right here, right above our detail band. Okay, so we'll want to add a group footer. to return our state count. So we're going to go ahead and click on Create next to the footer band. And as you can see here, it automatically created our group footer band. Okay, so with band groupings, we need to define what we're going to group by. So we can either group by a data field or an expression. So we'll click on our ellipses to go into our expression window to add our group by field. So we're going to go ahead and click on database field since we want to group by state. We're going to go ahead and select Argos data and then state and click OK. And click OK once again to go back into our band editor. And now we want to go ahead and make the color of our band match the color of our example. So we will click on our color and click OK. And then we also want to reprint this band on a new page in case we have a grouping that doesn't finish printing on one page and goes on to our next page. The header will the group header will reprint so we know which state we're actually on. So we're going to go ahead and check that, and we also want to add a top frame. And now we will click OK. So now we're going to go ahead and edit our group footer to be a different color so it stands out. So we're going to go ahead and go to color, and we'll choose this gray right here. And then we're also going to go ahead and give it a bottom frame and click OK. Now we have a grouping band that contains a header and a footer band called Header 1 and Footer 1. The first thing we should do after adding a new band is to rename it. Header 1 and Footer 1 don't mean much to me. I want something that's a bit more meaningful. So I'll click on the group header band. I could always right click and go to Options, or I can click on the options here right underneath our structure pane. And then we can go ahead and rename this. So we're going to go ahead and rename it to State Group Header and click OK. And we'll do the same thing with our group footer. And rename this to State Group Footer. And click OK to save our changes. Alright, and notice now that in our structure panel we have our state group footer and our state group header. So now let's go ahead and save and preview our report. And notice now that our grouping is correct. We're grouping by state, and we can see that here. And also you can see that our group header prints right after our group footer, so we'll want to add a child band to add some spacing. And since our state is printing, since we're grouping by state, we don't want state to print on each record, so we'll go ahead and change this to print in our group header. So we're going to go ahead and click Close to apply those changes. First, we're going to go ahead and add our child band as our spacer. So we're going to go ahead and click on our child band icon. And then we're going to go ahead and select our parent band to be the state group footer. And notice now that it's easier to select which band we want because we did rename these from Header 1 and Footer 1. And let's see, that's all we need here since it's just going to be used as a spacer. So we'll click OK. Now we're going to go ahead and go to our options too. Alright, so we have a question. Why did we select the footer instead of a header? Because we want, after each footer print, we wanted to add a space after our footer, so there's a space between the group header and the child band. If we would have added the child band to the header, we would have printed that spacer right underneath the group header, so we would have had a space between our header band and then our details, which would still print that group header and group footer close to each other. So that's why we need to add it to the group footer, so there's a space between the group footer and then the next header. Since we are going to be removing this column header, there won't then be a band on top of our group header that would print on each page to have the spacer there. That's why we're adding it to our footer. All right, so we have a question. I thought we were going to be putting the state's code in the child. We're actually going to be putting the codes in the group header. We won't be adding a child band to our group header. We will be actually moving our fields, these column headers, into the group header. We don't need two bands to that. All right, sorry about that. I should have been a bit clear about what we were going to be doing. So we will be moving our labels into our group header, and our footer is, and our child band is tied to our group footer. So we're going to go ahead and rename this to state group child, and then we're going to go ahead and give it a height of 0.15 and click OK. Now I have a band that will always follow our group footer band to create a space between the footer and the following header. So now we're going to go ahead and complete our group header. So we're going to go ahead and expand our group header to add some more space to work in, and we're going to go ahead and expand our detail band as well. All right. Since I mentioned that we're going to be moving our state label to print in our group header and not for each record, we're going to go ahead and move our state database text field to our state group header. But notice now, if I select this guy and try to drag it up, I can't. And that is because a band is essentially its own object. We can't move objects that are within a band to a different band by clicking and dragging. To move an object, we will have to right-click and we will have to cut and then paste into the new band that we want to add our object to. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we will move our state to the top left-hand side, just like we had in our, report that I showed you at the beginning. So now we're going to go ahead and change the font size to 16. All right. So just a tad bit to the left. All right. So now since we move our state into our group header band, we don't need it from our column header. So we're going to go ahead and delete it. And now we have some extra space in our band, so we're going to go ahead and add our street, since our record's only returning our name, our city, and our zip. So we're going to go ahead and make some room for the street by resizing our object. So we're going to go ahead and make the city just a bit smaller, and then we're going to, like I mentioned, these guys are labels, so we can change the size. It won't be affected. There we go. So now we have some extra space to add our street. Again, we're going to go ahead and move these guys as well. We know our zip isn't that large, so we're going to go ahead and resize this guy. And then we're going to go ahead and move our city. Let's see. And notice with our guidelines, we can align these guys to print at the same area. Okay, and again, we can go ahead and align our objects using our toolbar. So we want to align it by the first name. We're going to go ahead and align them by their tops. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with our database text fields. Okay, so now that we've added some space to add our street, we're first going to go ahead and add our label. So to add our label, we're going to go ahead and click on this A icon and click on our column header. And then we're going to go ahead and add our properties here. So we're going to go ahead and name this street. And we're going to go ahead and leave the default and click OK. So we're going to go ahead and align these guys. And then we're going to move this a little bit to the left. Again, we can use our arrows in our keyboard to move these. All right, now that we've added our label, we're going to go ahead and add our database text field to our detail band. So to add our database text field, we'll click on this A with the little database icon, and then we'll click on our detail band to add it. And then we're going to go ahead and leave our Argos data set. And then we're going to go ahead and click on street 1. All right, let's see here. So that looks good, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. And notice now that the default font for our details is the Homa 8. And when we added our object, it got changed to Arial. So we're going to go ahead and change this to match our other fields. Now we're going to align our objects. And then we're going to shift this guy just a little bit so it's aligned with our label. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and move our labels from our column header to our group header. So we're going to go ahead and select our labels. And then we're going to cut, and then we're going to paste them in our group header. And now, because our formatting didn't change, notice that our formatting didn't change because before we had set these labels to change with the band. So we have our transparent labels here, which match the same as we saw in our preview of our report that we were going to be creating. So we're going to go ahead and change these to be just a tad bit larger. So we're going to change the size to 14. And then we're going to go ahead and change the color to white. I think that would look better. All right, and let's go ahead and do the same thing with the state. All right, that's much legible now. So now that we have moved our labels to our group header, we no longer need our column header band. So we will select it, and we can right-click and delete. We could always click on delete in our keyboard, or we can click on our X to delete the object and say, yes, we want to delete our band, and click OK. All right, so now that we have our our group header the way we want and our detail, we're going to go ahead and resize these guys back to their original size. And we will go ahead and save and preview how our report looks like. Okay, notice this is looking much better. We have our state and then our headers in our group header band, and then we have the street, the city, and the zip code. We have a space between our group footer and the following group header, and this is looking good. Now we just need to add our count for each date and the total count for our report. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll click close. All right, so we're going to go ahead and add a summary band to add the total number of addresses for the entire report. So we'll click on our single band icon, and then we will change this to our summary band. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and let's see. We won't change anything here, so we're going to go ahead and click OK. So we're going to go ahead and rename our band from band 2 to summary. We will click OK. So to count the total number of addresses, we will be using an expression. So we'll click on our expression icon, E equals empty squared, and click on our band to add it. And we're going to go ahead and click on our ellipses to bring up our expression wizard, and create our expression. So we're going to go ahead and click on the function since we will be using the count to bring back each record being returned, the count of each record being returned. So we will click continue here. So at this point, our expression would only return the number of records, and we are going to go ahead and add some wording before the number. So we're going to put our cursor in front of our count, and we're going to go ahead and add some text. So we will add total state count and add a space, a single quote, and our plus sign to concatenate. So we can go ahead and validate, and there's no errors, so now we'll have the total state count and then the count of states. So that looks good. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And now we're going to go ahead and align this guy to the center, and we will check auto size width. So the width changes as our number gets larger. Alright, so let's go ahead and click OK. So now we're going to align this. Actually, we're going to go ahead and change the font. It's kind of tiny, so we will change it to 16, and now we're going to align it to the center of our band. Okay, and now we will have an count for our entire state count, for our entire report. So now we want to have an individual state count for each state being printed, so we're going to go ahead and add an expression to our group footer. Since our expression is going to be similar to the one that we've already created, we're going to go ahead and make a copy, and we'll paste it in our group footer. Alright, and now we're going to go ahead and edit our expression to modify it. And then we're going to go ahead and click on our ellipses to get to our expression wizard. So we will go ahead and delete total state. So we will have right here a count. So now we're going to go ahead and add our database field so the actual state appears. So we'll have the state count and then the actual count of the state. So we're going to go ahead and put our cursor at the beginning, and then we're going to click on database text field, go to Argos data, and click on state. Okay, and again we will add a plus sign to concatenate. So now our expression is going to read Argos data.state, count, and then the actual count. We're going to go ahead and validate. That looks good. There are no errors. And we'll click OK. And we're going to go ahead and modify this guy to be centered to the left. And we're also going to check this reset after print option. The reset after print is important because we don't want this count to be continually counting for all our records. We want to reset this after every state. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And then we're going to go ahead and move this guy a little bit to the left as we saw in our preview. Alright, so we'll go ahead and save and preview our report looks like. So we've actually completed our report. We're going to go ahead and return all the records to see how our report turned out. We're going to go ahead and select all this address types and click OK. So now as you can see here, our report's very similar to the report that we had, that I demonstrated at the beginning of our training. We have our states with our group header with the state and our labels, then we have our detail, and then the count of the states. And then if we go to the end of our report, we can see the total state count. Alright, the next topic we're going to go ahead and cover is our library of objects. We've added our logo to our vendor report by retrieving it from the library of objects. Now I want to show you how to add objects to the library. We have created our report almost completely from scratch. But there are many elements in our report that we probably want to use sometime in the future. So instead of recreating these objects every time we want to use them in a report, we can save them into the library of objects, and we can save objects, bands, object groups, band groups, and even templates to the library of objects. So back in Argos, we will first select our object that we want to add to our library of objects, click on our logo, and then we'll click on this book with the plus sign icon to add objects to the library of objects. like I meant, it will automatically take us to our folder of the view, of the person we're signed in as. So right now it's taking us to, but if we have access to a different folder, we could always select there and add it. So we're going to go ahead and give our object a name and a description, and then we will click OK to add it. And that's all we need to do to add an object to the library of objects. So now, what if we want to go ahead and add an object that has multiple objects, such as a band that has both our logo and our label. So we can also add bands by selecting the band that we want to add and clicking on the library icon, which is the book with the plus sign, and we can give our name and then our description and click OK to add it. We can also create templates that contain preset fonts and images. For a template, we recommend that any data that's related to a database is cleared out. Otherwise, it will conflict with any data added by the user in the report wizard. To create a template, we will click on the margin of our report so nothing is selected. Once we've verified that we've clicked on the margin, we will click on the book with the plus sign to add to our library of objects, and then we can give it our name and a description, and click OK to add it. Alright, and one more item I like to go ahead and point out is right here on our bottom left right-hand corner, we have our Help button here. So to get to our in-product help, we can always click on the Help button here. We can click on the F1 key as well, and that will take us to our in-product help. And if we click on the F1 key here, it will take you to the in-product help of the section you are in. So right now we were inside the Banded Report editor, so it'll take you to the Banded Report editor section in our web help. Okay, so before we end our training, I like to go ahead and go over our knowledge base. So if we close out of our Banded Report, we can get to our knowledge base by clicking on our support icon inside of Argos, and it will take you to our support.evisions.com website. And in here, we have our knowledge base. You can see it right here on the top right-hand corner. And if we click on the knowledge base, it will take you to our knowledge base. And our knowledge base will help answer many common questions or issues. To use the knowledge base, you can navigate to the Argos section and select the subcategory. Or if you have any keywords to type in, we could also use our search bar here. So we want to see if we can run reports in Argos Web Viewer. So we will enter that in our search text bar, and then the knowledge base will return any articles if something similar is found. And then you can select on the article and then review it. Thank you everybody for joining us in our training today. Please sign up for our trainings for the Data Block Designer and Argos Advanced if you'd like through our evisions.com website. You guys have a great day, and thank you.